The Florida Panthers are Stanley Cup champions. Not a punchline, not being mocked for meager attendance. Not wallowing in mediocrity on and off the ice as the team went 25 years between playoff series victories. Oh, there could have been more embarrassment, like the most embarrassment. Florida nearly fumbled the bag against Edmonton, becoming just the third team in NHL history to blow a 3-0 Stanley Cup final series lead to force a Game 7. They could have been the Atlanta Falcons in Super Bowl LI, or Greg Norman in the 1996 Masters, or the 1942 Detroit Red Wings, the only team in NHL history to lose the Stanley Cup final after winning the first 3 games. It would have been very Florida Panthers to have done that. But that's not who this franchise is anymore. They're not a joke, they're Stanley Cup champions. It's pretty freaking cool. Defenseman Aaron Ekblad, who is second to Barkov in career games played as a Panther, said, "It wasn't easy those first few years. There was a lot of learning and growing. New GMs, new coaches. That revolving door was tough, right? The fact that we're at this point now where the expectation is to make the playoffs and the expectation is to challenge for a championship, that's a really cool thing. I'm so happy to have been through it all with this franchise." Barkov stuck with them, Ekblad stuck with them, and more South Florida fans than you'd realize stuck with them, from the rat-tossing mid-1990s to their Stanley Cup parade this season. When Florida winger Evan Rodriguez was growing up in Toronto, the media covered only Canadian teams and winning teams. So I would say I probably wasn't focused on the Panthers too much, the 30-year-old said. Fellow Ontario native Ryan Lomberg, 29, remembered how the Panthers were covered on social media. "I remember seeing pictures of the empty arena, seeing all the red seats and seeing maybe a couple of thousand fans. Being a kid from Toronto, I remember not really understanding how the contrast with other teams was so extreme," he said. "It doesn't even make sense to me how it was back then. The second I got here 4 years ago, the fans have been amazing. We have a strong following." Florida's attendance woes were a league-wide punchline, and the franchise did nothing to discourage it. In 2004, while I was at college in Orlando, I met a guy who was a Lightning fan while I was watching the finals at a bar, Panthers fan David Roth said. I told him I was a Panthers fan, and he looked at me with a look of absolute bewilderment and just said, "Why?" As if it were so foreign a concept to be a fan of a team in Florida other than the Lightning. When you go 25 years between playoff series wins and then only make the playoffs a couple of times during that span, Florida CEO Matthew Caldwell said. Caldwell ascended to his position in 2016, having worked with owner Vinny Viola for several years. Viola, who purchased the team in 2013, is one of a handful of majority owners during the team's turbulent history. They were founded as an expansion team by billionaire Wayne Huizenga, who initially wanted to name them the Blockbusters in honor of his video rental chain. He sold the franchise to pharmaceutical businessman Alan Cohen and former NFL quarterback Bernie Kosar in 2001. Cliff Viner became general partner in 2010 and made 2 moves that would set up Florida for later success, hiring former Chicago Blackhawks GM Dale Talon as head of hockey operations and tasking him with rebuilding through the draft. When Viola took over, the real work began to repair the Panthers' reputation. It started with the way they ticketed games. There was a lot of comp tickets. Just all these gimmicks to get people into the arena, Caldwell said. That doesn't work in the long term. It really angers your season ticket holders when you're giving out all these freebies and promotions to people off the streets. With the team's attendance struggles came constant relocation speculation. There were all these rumors that we should be moved, Caldwell said, that this new ownership group was fixing it up and trying to relocate to Quebec at the time. Those were the headwinds we had to deal with. When the Colorado Avalanche celebrated their Stanley Cup final sweep of the Panthers in 1996, they skated through an ever-increasing pile of plastic rats. The rat-tossing stems from a legendary moment in 1995 to 96, when forward Scott Mellenby used his stick to exterminate a rat in the locker room before a game. He then used the same stick to score 2 goals that night, accomplishing what his teammates called a rat trick. To this day, rubber rats are available for purchase in the official Florida team store for $5 each, with the store selling upward of $150 on game days. The plastic rats were symbolic of what the franchise had created in its third NHL season tradition. The Cinderella run bonded hockey fans and minted new ones. A few days after the 1996 final, the Panthers hosted 15,000 fans at Miami Arena for a celebration of that season's success. The hopes were high that this was the start of something special for the franchise. Then they didn't win another playoff series until 25 seasons later. It was brutal. There were so many years in the wilderness, Panthers fan Scott Candle said. We always seemed to have one or two good players with promise, like Nathan Horton, Stephen Weiss and Olli Jokinen, but ownership's answer was always to bring in older players past their prime to try to create depth getting over the hump, and it was always with terrible results. When Viola purchased the team, Jonathan Huberdeau, number 3 overall in 2011, and Barkov, number 2 in 2013, had been drafted. Ekblad, number 1, would join them in 2014, but success didn't follow right away. There were 5 coaching changes. There was an internal struggle between Talon and the Computer Boys, the moniker given to the data-driven front office by some members of the Canadian media, that bred an inconsistent philosophy and bad decisions, like letting Jonathan Marchessault slip away in the Vegas expansion draft. At one point, Talon was demoted as GM in 2016, then reinstated in 2017. But it was Talon's presence in 2019 that helped the Panthers achieve an important turning point in their path to success, luring Joel Quenneville to coach the team. Talon had previously hired him to coach the Blackhawks. After Chicago fired Quenneville, the Panthers swooped in with a significant financial offer and the chance to work with Talon again. He accepted. He was obviously a hot commodity at the time coming out of Chicago, Caldwell said. When we were able to land him, I think a lot of people said, wow, Joel can go anywhere and he picks Florida. We certainly offered a good contract, but other big franchises wanted him too. And then we signed Bob. Florida handed 2-time Vezina Trophy winner and free agent goalie Sergei Bobrovsky of the Columbus Blue Jackets a 7-year deal, with an annual average value of $10 million in summer 2019. In the past, the franchise struggled to attract free agents. Now one of the top ones had chosen them.